you do to go from being a baritone to a tenor? And can anyone do it?
I had a very long journey, actually, becoming a tenor, if one wants to call that, because I've always kept my baritonal speaking voice, and low notes were never a problem for me, honestly. I wake up and I have, you know, ah, that's a low C. Ah, and tenors usually bottom out at ah, 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 ah. So the problem is that I went through a lot of questioning for a good, 6 to 8 years, whether or not I was choosing the right way. And sometimes I still think the same way. And this is kind of the biggest reason that I am fighting against this kind of idea of vocal production. There's this genre, well, I wouldn't call it genre, but there's a school of thought that there is a thing called a Fach System. So it comes from German word, and it basically means steps or categories of voice types. And it came about in the late 1800s, and it's still prominently talked about and predominantly talked about in classical music. And many people talk about Fachs when they're trying to talk about what kind of tenor a person is, or what kind of soprano or mezzo or bass someone is. And there's so many different subgenres within each voice category. But the truth of the matter is that everyone has at least 2.5 octaves, and most people have 3 octaves, depending on their voice. But the problem is that most people just don't know how to reach the notes. And I was like that too for years and years and years. I couldn't sing anything. I mean, I could really operatically produce only an octave and a half. So, I didn't know how to find even 2 octaves for years, because it all turned into falsetto and this kind of hootiness when I was up there, because it's so unnatural for me to sing high. It took, I would say a good 4 or 5 years of serious training before I could sing above a G. And that was, from 19 to 23, 24, I was able to then sing above a G in the tenor range, but it was so unstable all the way until, even today. Now, today it's a little bit better now. I'm in my early 40s, and I've had a good kind of handle on my voice for the last 10 years, I would say. But the first 10 years of truly questioning, from like 21 till 31, I didn't know whether or not it was possible to become a tenor. I was really hoping it would be, because I was told by a teacher that I had that he was a natural tenor, and one of these guys that talks up here and just naturally has a higher speaking voice. And it's really difficult for me to speak like that. And when people hear me now, when they hear me speak, and I'll go into a shop and someone will say, "Yeah, an opera singer." It's like, "Oh, okay, you a baritone or a bass?" And I was like, "Actually, no, I've made a career as a tenor." And they're perplexed, and they're like, "Yeah, I know, me too." But as I've always considered myself a baritenor, but the reason I went into the tenor repertoire is because it was such a challenge, and I realized that I needed to figure out my voice, and the only way to do that was to challenge myself to the absolute maximum, which tenors are a genre in and of themselves, and an entire beast that you can't even imagine how difficult it is singing constantly in the area that tenors sing in, because no other voice category sings like this, other than I would say the haute contre or countertenor, which is in a very specific range. But you can, it's so difficult to sing up in or male sopranists range. It's very, very difficult as well, because most of their repertoire is just like tenor. You're constantly on this area where you're walking on eggshells and trying to get in between a bunch of different registers. And for me, it took a lot of disappointment, a lot of a lot of failed auditions, and a lot of frustration for years, because I didn't know if anything that I was doing was actually producing results, because it was so unstable and I couldn't understand how to do it. But literally, it was a good 10 years into it that I finally started to consider myself, okay, I can become a valid tenor and I can do this. Because baritone was the genre that always, and the voice category that I always considered myself, and the most easy and natural to my own voice. But then I discovered that there's this other category called the barotenor that is still kind of unknown and kind of controversial, and which is actually what I named my album Barotenor. And I started doing lots of research on my own, trying to scour through the internet and finding all of the literature about singers that had the same kind of voice as me, that had this naturally low, but then could have the upper extension into the higher repertoire. That was the crazy land of tenor world, because there's tenors, then there's crazy tenors, and I live in the crazy tenor world, because I've sung every like the highest thing except for Puritani would be the only really insanely high role that I haven't sung. I've sung stuff that nobody's ever heard of, that I still probably shouldn't have sung. And I've also sung the lowest of all of tenor repertoire. And it's so interesting to me, because I'm not unique, to be totally honest. And the question was posed is, can anybody do this? And yes, anybody could push themselves. You all have natural tendencies, but the interesting thing is that the voice is on a spectrum. Like I said, we all live within a 3-octave possibility at our top and our low. But most of our voice and our category and career depends on a lot of different factors. The interesting thing is, it's not just like, oh, well, if I can sing this, then I'm a baritone. If I can sing this, I'm a tenor. And if I can sing this, I'm a bass. No, that's completely untrue, because it's all based in the whole Fach system. Why I have such a problem with this hyper categorization of the voice is that everything changes, the voice changes, and the biggest thing that you need to realize is that certain repertoire calls for a certain type of personality and type of audacity, to be honest. Or if you notice that you're a little bit less, you're more timid, and you'd rather go into characters that are more psychologically inspired and not so bombastic, that goes into a different genre. And you can find it throughout history in the way that the voice writing developed. But the interesting thing is that I've compiled over a list of 30 different people that started as baritone and changed to tenor, or went from tenor and turned to baritone. And it was a very common thing up until the mid 1800s, and people would just have to figure out how to sing what the people wrote, or people would write for a very specific singer who was an extraordinary singer, but was not categorized as, oh, that person's a bass. I mean, there's a great example of Solié, who is this really interesting singer back in the early 1800s, who started as a boy soprano, then made a beginning career as a tenor, then switched to baritone, then finished his whole career as a bass. And there's the great example of Liza Connell, one of the greatest singers of all time. She started her entire career as a contralto, and then as she got older, changed her techniques and started figuring out how to sustain high notes. And it's a totally different support system when you're singing this crazy repertoire when you're up higher. And she became one of the world famous dramatic sopranos, singing some of the most powerful and highest repertoire possible. So this kind of thing is absolutely possible for anyone. It just depends on your personality first, and how much work you're willing to put into it. Because to be honest, I was obsessed with the voice and sounds and how to overcome my inadequacy in my voice. And this is the most important thing, is that if you really, really, really want something and you give everything to it, you can achieve something more than you've ever imagined. And looking back at my career in the last 15 years, it's astounding to me. And I mean, sometimes I can't even believe that I sang certain things, but I was so focused and hyper focused into what I was doing. But I was able to achieve some things that I can't really do now. But fortunately, my career's progressed in a way that it's allowed me to stay healthy and vocally, and somewhat mentally healthy. But anybody can do this. Honestly, it's not. I'm not so unique, and it's only Michael Spires could do this thing. I've heard that, and it makes me really get upset, because no, anybody can do it. It's just, what are you willing to give up to get to what you want? And that's the biggest thing that we all have to ask. But as far as the voice is concerned, no one is just a bass. No one is just a baritone. No one is just a soprano. And that's why the greatest example is that people don't even bat an eye when they say a mezzo soprano, because that's an accepted category. But now baritone is still so controversial, but it never was in history. But you see all these people that are so obsessed with hypercategorization and being right, but it's all, the voice is all on a spectrum, and everybody can do. I mean, you're obviously not going to be able to sing bass if you don't have the ability to sing low, and you can develop it a little bit, but you're going to have a natural range of which your voice sits in. But you can develop much higher. I mean, I basically gained an entire octave, what I didn't know, and I was able to gain another full, almost octave below what I could sing. So I basically built my voice to be fluid throughout three octaves, and everybody can do this. It just takes so much time and frustration and tenacity. So anyone can do it. Just got to be a little crazy.